Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Tamika Chesser case. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. Subscribe and like this video if you want to learn more about the mental health and psychological indicators of true crime cases like this one. My analysis is based on my speculations, not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. What happens when a line between a polished public persona and a fractured private reality completely dissolves? We often assume that those who seek the spotlight are driven by vanity or ambition. But sometimes the pressure of being perceived can trigger a catastrophic collapse of the self. In the case of the reality TV star Tamika Chesser, we aren't just looking at the crime, we are looking at the total psychological disintegration that ended one of the most confusing and brutal acts imaginable. It forces us to question how well we truly know the people we watch on the screens, and how quickly the human mind can fracture under the weight of unseen pressures. In June 2025, authorities in Port Lincoln, South Australia, responded to a report of a fire at a residential property. What they found was a scene of chaos that contrasted sharply with the silence of the woman sitting in the backyard. Tamika Chesser, known to many as the contestant on The Beauty and the Geek, was discovered sitting in a garden chair completely catatonic. From a psychological perspective, catatonia is a neuropsychiatric syndrome that affects a person's ability to move and respond in the world around them. When police approached Tamika in the garden, she was reportedly unresponsive. She wasn't trying to flee the scene. She wasn't trying to explain what had happened. She was simply existing in a state of frozen detachment. In the context of a violent crime, this kind of immobility often points to a mind that is shut down in the face of overwhelming trauma or psychosis. The human brain has a limit to what it can process, and when that limit is breached, the body often takes over by freezing. It creates a wall between the perpetrator and the reality of their actions. We have to wonder what was happening in Tamika's mind as she sat there, mere feet away from the scene where her partner, Julian's story, had just lost his life. Was she disassociated? Was she trapped in a hallucination? The police documents noted that she remained in the state even as she was taken into custody, eventually being transferred to a mental health facility rather than a standard jail cell. This specific behavior is a critical indicator because it defies the standard fight or flight response we expect from someone who had just committed a crime. Usually, adrenaline propels an offender to run or to hide, but catatonia suggests a complete short circuit of the survival instinct. It implies that the internal landscape of her mind was so overwhelming that the external world, police, fire, sirens, ceased to exist for her. The details of the crime itself are difficult to comprehend and speak to the profound lack of logical planning. Julian's story was a 39-year-old musician described as big-hearted and kind. He was found inside the home, and he had been beheaded. The brutality of this act stands in stark contrast to the lack of an escape plan. Tamika allegedly started a fire, which is a common forensic countermeasure used by offenders to destroy evidence. However, the fact that she remained on the property suggests a conflict between disorganized thinking and an impulse to cover her tracks. In mental health psychology, we look at the difference between organized and disorganized offenders. An organized offender brings a weapon, commits the crime, and leaves efficiently. A disorganized offender often leaves the scene chaotic, uses weapons found on site, and stays in the vicinity. Tamika's behavior leans heavily toward the disorganized spectrum, which strongly correlates with a psychotic episode rather than a premeditated cold-blooded murder. Witnesses reported seeing smoke coming from the unit and asking Tamika what was happening. Her alleged response was simply that nothing was wrong before she walked her dogs. This level of denial, ignoring a literal fire, suggests a break from reality where the brain refuses to acknowledge the immediate physical environment. It's a form of cognitive dissonance so severe that the person can look at the burning building and genuinely believe or attempt to convince themselves that everything is normal. The fire may have been a fleeting moment of realization, I need to hide this, followed immediately by a return to that catatonic frozen state. This oscillation between action and inaction is often a hallmark of a mind moving in and out of a delusional state. When Tamika finally appeared in court via video link, another disturbing detail came to light. The former model, known for her long blonde hair and glamorous image, had shaved her head completely bald. From a psychological perspective, this drastic alteration of physical appearance can often signal a severe internal crisis or a manic break. In clinical terms, we sometimes see this behavior when an individual is attempting to reject their identity or shed a past version of themselves that feels contaminated or unbearable. It is a visible manifestation of the internal turmoil, a way to exert control when the mind feels like it's spiraling into chaos. This act of shaving her head suggests that Tamika may have been experiencing a profound detachment from the person that the world knew her to be. It is an act of self-erasure. By removing the hair, which is often tied to vanity and femininity in the context of a former career, she may have been symbolically killing her old self. We must consider if this was a result of a narcissistic injury. If an individual's self-worth is tied to an external validation, the loss of that attention, or the pressure to maintain a perfect image, can lead to a collapse of the ego. Tamika had moved to Port Lincoln recently, a significant change in environment away from the spotlight she once sought. Transitions are high-risk times for individuals with underlying mental health vulnerabilities. When the structure of the self collapses, the result can be a break from reality where the person perceives the closest to them, like a romantic partner, as threats or symbols of their own failure. Julian's story may have simply been in the wrong place when this internal break occurred, becoming the target of a rage that had nothing to do with him personally. The specific nature of the violence, beheading, and dismemberment is an extremely rare in domestic homicide cases. When it does occur, it often indicates a need to dehumanize the victim or a belief that the victim is something other than human. In psychotic delusions, a perpetrator might believe they are fighting a demon or an entity that must be completely stopped. The removal of the head can symbolically represent silencing or a voice removing the identity of the threat. This level of overkill usually suggests that the perpetrator was not in a rational state of mind. They likely weren't seeing their partner. They were seeing a projection of their own delusions. The fact that Julian's head was missing from the scene initially and found weeks later by a dog walker adds another layer of complexity. It suggests a prolonged interaction with the victim after death, which is disturbing but clinically significant. It implies that the psychotic state persisted for some time after the violence ended. She didn't snap out of it immediately. The retrieval of the head miles away suggests she traveled with the remains, further complicating the timeline of her psychosis. This wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a sustained period of disorganized thinking and action. A highly significant and heartbreaking detail emerged in November 2025. It was revealed that Tamika Chesser is pregnant behind bars, with a due date expected early 2026. This timeline suggests she was likely in the early stages of pregnancy at the time of the crime in June 2025. This introduces a critical biological factor, the potential for prenatal psychosis. While we often hear about postpartum psychosis occurring after birth, hormonal shifts during the first trimester can also trigger severe mental health episodes in those predisposed to them. For someone who may have already been struggling with mental health issues, as her family indicated she was in and out of care, the rapid hormonal changes could have acted as a catalyst. This does not excuse the violence, but it provides a potential psychological why for the sudden escalation. It paints a picture of a perfect storm, a new environment, potential isolation, a history of mental health struggles, and a massive biological shift all occurring simultaneously. It can cause hallucinations, delusions, and rapid mood swings, often centering around the pregnancy or the partner. If Tamika was experiencing this, she may have been living in a terrifying altered reality that no one else could see. The tragedy is that these symptoms can escalate rapidly, sometimes within days, leaving families with little time to intervene. Reports indicate that Tamika and Julian had only been in Port Lincoln for a few months. Isolation is a powerful catalyst for mental health decline. Without a support network of friends or family who might notice the warning signs, a person can spiral very quickly. In a closed domestic environment, delusions can feed on themselves without a reality check from the outside world. If Tamika was struggling, Julian may have been the only witness to her decline. Tragically, in many cases of psychosis-driven violence, the person trying to help or calm the individual becomes the victim because they are the only obstacle in the delusional person's path. We see this pattern in many severe mental health cases where families report that the individual wasn't themselves in days leading up to the event. Tamika's sister later stated that the family had concerns about her mental health in the months prior, noting that she had been in and out of facilities. Locals in Port Lincoln also reported seeing her engaging in bizarre behavior, such as making animal noises at a war memorial prior to the murder. These were clear warning signs of a disintegrating mind. This suggests that the warning signs were there, but the safety net failed to catch her before the tragedy occurred. Currently, Tamika is being held under a mental health detention order at James Nash House. The legal status confirms that the authorities recognize a significant psychiatric component to this case. She is not just a suspect, she is a patient. It forces us to ask difficult questions about how we can monitor the mental health of those who drift in and out of the public eye. Could this have been prevented if someone had intervened when the first signs of instability appeared? The tragedy here is twofold. A man named Julian Story, loved by his community and described as a gifted musician, has lost his life in a horrific manner. And a woman who once smiled for cameras and sought a life of glamour has completely lost her grip on reality. It's a stark reminder that mental health is not just a personal issue, it's a safety issue. When the mind breaks, the consequences can be devastating for everyone involved. What did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? Let me know. If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.